So the other day I started thinking about B-sides. In an age like today, when you can pull up pretty much any song you want instantly, no matter how obscure, it's not a thing. But back when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, maybe you didn't have enough money to buy the whole album, so you just bought a single. And that B-side would allow you to hear at least one more tune from the album and maybe make a slightly more informed decision as to whether you wanted to buy the whole thing. But maybe the coolest of all, occasionally they'd throw a song on the B-side that wasn't even on the album. That was a total bonus. Before CDs, you could only fit so much music on a piece of vinyl. So quite often, songs that might have been perfectly worthy were cut. Hard decisions had to be made. Or maybe a band had a great song that didn't quite fit the theme of a certain album. Perfect opportunity to throw it on a B-side and get it out there. So the subject of this video is killer B-sides, tunes that were probably just as good, if not even better than the A-sides. And as usual, there's going to be a ton of great stuff left off here. I've only got 10. This subject screams out for a part 2, which I'm almost certainly going to do. All right, let's get into it.
I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it.
How is it possible that a song that has been praised as one of the greatest, if not the greatest song of all time, by songwriting geniuses like Jimmy Webb, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Pete Townsend, David Bowie, Barry Gibb, Bono, and countless others, ended up as a B-side? I don't know, but that's precisely what happened with God Only Knows. The song, of course, was taken from the phenomenal Pet Sounds album, nominally a Beach Boys record, but in reality a Brian Wilson solo project on which the Beach Boys sang and played. Now that album, of course, is also commonly named as the best pop/rock album of all time. It usually trades off in the number 1 spot with the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper. To be fair, God Only Knows was released as an A-side in some countries, but in the US, it was the B-side of Wouldn't It Be Nice. Now, of course, Wouldn't It Be Nice is a great track in its own right, but I think few would disagree that God Only Knows is just on another level altogether. Wilson wrote the music. Tony Asher, who was Brian's collaborator throughout the Pet Sounds album, wrote the lyrics, and the beautiful vocal was by Brian's brother Carl. It's often regarded as his best. There are several instruments appearing in this song that are very unconventional for pop music. We've got the very prominent sleigh bells. I love the sleigh bells in this. You've got French horn, harpsichord, and others. The song is renowned for its musical sophistication, particularly the fact that there's no strong tonal center. We'll talk about that more in a minute. There's also a series of repeating musical rounds at the end. Now, if you don't know what a musical round is, maybe when you were a kid in music class, they would split up the kids and sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. One group would start row, row, row your boat. And then as soon as they were getting to Gently Down the Stream, the next group would come in, row, row, row your boat. Pretty soon you've got several groups all singing the same song, but at different points, yet it all fits together. That's what's going on here. Check it out.
God only knows what I'd be without. God only knows what I'd be without.
Musically, the song is fascinating. We're in the key of E, but it kind of takes a long time to really feel like it. We start right off with a non-diatonic chord, D/A. I may not always love you. There's a B minor 6, another chord that's not in the key of E. Finally, we get an F sharp minor 7. That's the 2 chord of E, which leads to B/A, B is the 5 chord, but the A on the bottom adds a lot of tension. And then a 2-5-1. We end up on E, but with a B on the bass, which makes it feel much more unstable. Though life could still go on, believe me. But it's almost like now that we've finally arrived at our 1 chord, Wilson doesn't want us to get too comfortable, so he immediately jumps up to a C diminished, which really shakes things up. Then back to the E, and then A sharp minor 7 flat 5, leading into the chorus. And look at the bass movement during that segment. B, up a half step to C, then immediately back down to B, then moving chromatically down, A sharp, A. We can just see the narrator pacing nervously back and forth, trying to get his words straight, unsure of himself. But the one thing he knows without a doubt, he would be utterly lost without this girl. And the music reflects this. Finally, we get a progression with a definite objective, moving straight down from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. God only knows what I'd be without you. If the rain comes, they run and hide their heads. They might as well be dead. If the rain comes, if the rain comes. So let me start by saying that this entire video could have easily been nothing but Beatles B-sides. They were the kings of the incredible B-side. I mean, give me a break. You've got Eleanor Rigby as the B-side of Yellow Submarine. You've got Strawberry Fields Forever on the back of Penny Lane. Technically, that one I think was marketed as a double A-sided single. But bottom line, both damn songs were on the same record. You've got I Am the Walrus as the B-side of Hello Goodbye. You've got Revolution as the B-side of Hey Jude. And the list goes on and on and on. Just an incredible testament to the wealth of great material these guys had. So bearing all that in mind, I decided that I would only include one single per band in this video. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair for everyone else. Not only that, but the choice of this particular song, Rain, which was the B-side of Paperback Writer, was almost arbitrary. Many of those other songs I named are much more famous. But I've always had a soft spot for Rain. I love the way it makes me feel. And I also think it was very important as an example of early psychedelia. I think it had a lot to do with kicking off the psychedelic era, which dominated the mid to late 60s. Rain perfectly illustrates the band's penchant for experimentation and coming up with groundbreaking studio techniques. The rhythm track is slowed down, which gives the whole thing a very sleepy, trippy kind of feel. Meanwhile, the vocal was recorded at a slightly slower speed and then sped up, making it sound higher. And then there's the fade out, in which we get Lennon's vocal run backwards. Another great effect. It sounds like he's speaking in tongues. This was the first time this was ever released on a major recording. The story goes that he came home one morning after a long session and accidentally put his reel-to-reel on the machine backwards and just loved the sound so much he actually wanted to do the whole song that way. But the rest of the band talked him out of it, probably for the best. As usual, Paul's bass line takes the thing to another level. It's not a particularly complicated bass line, but I love what he does in the chorus. The chorus is based on 2 chords, G major and C add 9. So over the G chord, he starts off with a simple root 5 octave figure. But rhythmically, he creates a lot of tension by playing quarter note triplets. I've talked about this before on my channel. When you string together several measures of quarter note triplets in 4/4 time, it sounds really cool because the triplet notes kind of fall in between the cracks of the normal 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully you can hear it there. And the other cool thing, then he creates harmonic tension. When the C add 9 chord comes around, Paul just keeps cranking out that G, D, G, root 5 octave figure. So cool. Shine, the weather's fine. The entire band turns in stellar performances. Ringo's drumming is amazing here, so inventive. He's often cited this as his best recorded drum performance, and many others agree. He's got that amazing, slightly behind the beat groove, but many of the fills here almost feel like they don't fit. They keep you on the edge of your seat, but then it somehow all works out. I think my favorite is when Lennon sings "When the Sun Shines" in the second verse towards the end. Ringo starts a fill on the third beat of a measure, carries it through the entire next measure, and then partway through the following measure. It seems like it should have ended on the first beat of that measure, but he carries it through and works it all out in the end. Check it out. When the sun shines, when the sun shines. And now the chorus. April Come She Will has made appearances on several records over the years. First on an album called The Paul Simon Songbook, which was released only in England way back in 1964. Later it appeared on the soundtrack for the film The Graduate, for which Simon and Garfunkel supplied most of the music, and it even appeared on an EP called Mrs. Robinson. But mixed in with all of that, it appeared as the B-side to the iconic single Scarborough Fair. It's a really pretty little tune that clocks in at just under 2 minutes, so probably a little bit too short to be an A-side. According to Paul Simon, the lyrics come from an old nursery rhyme that his English girlfriend used to recite. They compare the seasons and the forces of nature to the changing moods of a woman. In the springtime, nature is coming to life, and so is Simon's love. April come she will, when streams are ripe and swelled with rain. May she will stay, resting in my arms again. But by the summer, the writing is already on the wall. June she'll change her tune. In restless walks she'll prowl the night. July she will fly and give no warning to her flight. August die she must. The autumn winds blow chilly and cold. September I'll remember. A love once new has now grown old. Musically, it's quite simple as well. It's basically in the key of G major. I'm capoed on the first fret, but I'm using a standard open G shape. And then Simon goes for that classic folky move where you take your G shape and tack on 2 notes simultaneously. C, which is the sus4, and E, which is the 6th. Sounds so nice. He uses this in more songs than I can count. Scarborough Fair, Kathy's Song, Love Me Like a Rock, the list goes on and on. The rest of the chords are mostly key of G major with one exception. We get a nice F major 7 in there at one point. She will, when streams are ripe and swelled with rain. May she will stay,
the city streets you used to walk along with me. And every step I take recalls how much in love we used to be. Oh, how can I forget you when there is always something there to remind me?
And that, of course, Dionne Warwick's version of There's Always Something There to Remind Me, written by the incredible songwriting duo Burt Bacharach and Hal David. I never miss an opportunity to talk about those two on my channel. I did a whole video on them a while back. Do check it out if you're so inclined. The fact that this tune was a hit for several different artists over the years shows what an incredible B-side it was. A guy called Lou Johnson was the first to chart with it. He made it to number 49 in 1964. A bit later that year, Sandy Shaw made it to number 1 in the UK. And then nearly 2 decades later, a group called Naked Eyes hit number 8 on Billboard with it. If you're a Gen Xer like myself, that song was hard to escape on MTV around that time.
Well, how can I forget you, girl? And there is always something there to remind me. Always something there to remind me.
That over-the-top 80s production might be a bit much. I do think it dates the tune. But I have to say, I think overall it was successful. I really enjoy that version. But back to the Dionne Warwick version. In the midst of all of this, in 1968, she released it as the B-side of a tune called Who Is Gonna Love Me, which I suspect many of you have never even heard of. So I think it's safe to say this is one of those cases where the B-side outshined the A-side. Musically, this bears all the hallmarks of a typical Burt and Hal production. You've got the quirky little syncopated rhythm. You've got the little trumpet in the beginning, or possibly it's a cornet. I had a horn guy correct me on that once. Somebody can let me know which it is, because I have a hell of a hard time telling the difference. The chord progression during the verse really just consists of a couple of tried and true musical cliches, but Burt makes it sound fresh. Now, Dionne's version is in the key of G. I've transposed it to D, and I'm also tuned down a half step, but we're just going to call this D. And then the root note of that D chord is going to start descending chromatically. D becomes C sharp, giving us a D major 7 chord. Then becomes C, giving us a D7 chord. And right when that D7 chord hits, C not only becomes the flat 7th of the chord, but it also features prominently in the melody. I love it, beautiful. And then once that progression is completed, we go to the 4 chord G, and then the 4 minor, classic move, which just begs to resolve back to 1. Oh, how can I forget you when there is always something there to remind me? Always something there to remind me. I was born to love you, and I will never be free. You'll always be a part of me.
Helplessly hoping her harlequin, others nearby, awaiting a word.
This achingly beautiful Stephen Stills composition was the B-side of the very first Crosby, Stills and Nash single, a tune called Marrakesh Express that was written by Graham Nash. Now, don't get me wrong, I can understand why Marrakesh was the A-side. It's poppy and bouncy and happy. It's a cool enough little tune, whereas this one is slow, featuring only acoustic guitar and those great CSN vocal harmonies. But this is another one that I think just shreds the A-side. The lyrics to this tune are amazingly inventive. It was inspired by Still's breakup with Judy Collins. She was quite a muse for him around this time. You've also got Sweet Judy Blue Eyes from the same album. By all accounts, he struggled with the breakup, but at least it produced some really incredible work. The verses make liberal use of alliteration. He seizes on a letter and stacks up as many words as he can that begin with that letter. Verse 1, helplessly hoping her harlequin hovers nearby. Verse 2, gasping at glimpses of gentle true spirit. And 3, wordlessly watching, she waits by the window and wonders. And then the chorus utilizes some very clever wordplay. For example, when Still sings, they are one person, they are two alone, two has a double meaning here. It could be TWO as in two, or TOO, they are two alone. Pretty cool. They are one person, they are two alone. Together they are for each other. And in another really clever move, when Stills begins the chorus by singing "They are one person," he's all by himself. He is literally one person at that point. Then as the numbers count up, an additional voice is added each time to match the number. Clearly, they put a lot of thought into this. Now, earlier I'd made reference to the famous Crosby, Stills, and Nash harmonies, and they are something else. The way those voices blend is very special. But the harmonies are generally not very complex. Usually the three voices are just spelling out a triad. This is a great example. The song begins on an A minor. Stills, as usual, takes the low part, starting on the A. And then, in the middle, David Crosby, he's on the third, which is a C. And then, of course, the high voice, Graham Nash, always. He's on the fifth, which is E.
Stay drunk all the time. I said I got a little woman and she won't be true.
Hey Hey, What Can I Do was the B-side of the Immigrant Song, which was taken from the Led Zeppelin III album. But Hey Hey was one of those songs I referenced earlier that was not on the album. This was a bonus track that came out of nowhere, which was huge for Zeppelin fans. We didn't get a whole lot of that from this band. And it also begs the eternal question that we Zeppelin fans have been asking for the last 50 years or so, which is, why in the hell didn't they put this song on Zeppelin 3? Some would argue that it's better than a few of the things that ended up on there. I don't know if I'm in that school. I love the album as it is. But at one point, I did conduct a little thought experiment and considered what would have been the best placement of the tune had it been included on Zeppelin 3. Sequencing was so important back in the days of the album. And what I came up with, opening side 2, think about it. It fits the acoustic theme, but it's a little bit more up-tempo than things like Tangerine or That's the Way. It would have been a nice way to just break into the whole acoustic theme. I'd be interested to know what you guys think. Where would you have placed Hey Hey, What Can I Do on the Zepp 3 album? The chorus is the age-old blues rock theme of the cheating woman. I got a woman, wanna ball all day. I got a woman and she won't be true. I got a woman, stay drunk all the time. In the end, Robert decides he needs to pack his bags and move on his way, probably for the best. The chord progression is remarkably simple. They're essentially in A, although they're tuned down a half step. It's 1, 5, we get one borrowed chord. G comes from the parallel minor key of A minor, and then to the 4 chord D, and that's basically it. I love the use of the mandolin here. This is one of the many reasons why I feel it would have fit in so well on side 2 of the Zepp 3 album. I wanna tell you about the girl I love. My, she looks so fine. Oh, she's the only one that I've been dreaming of. Maybe someday she will be all mine. I wanna tell her that I love her so. I thrill with every touch. I need to tell her she's the only one I really love. Was the B-side of the iconic Stones tune Brown Sugar, both tracks taken from the Sticky Fingers album. And while I won't go as far as to say it's better than the A-side, I think it's just as good in a different way. A little faster, even raunchier. This is about as heavy as anything the Stones ever did. And I love the horns. I'm not usually a horns guy in rock and roll, but they really add here. This tune has remained an FM radio staple over the years. I'd go as far as to say that I hear it just about as much as Brown Sugar on the classic rock stations to this day. Great story here from Andy Johns about how Keith Richards turned this tune into the juggernaut that it is. When we were doing Bitch, Keith was very late. Jagger and Mick Taylor had been playing the song without him, and it didn't sound very good. I walked out of the kitchen, and Keith was sitting on the floor with no shoes, eating a bowl of cereal. Suddenly he said, "Oi, Andy, give me that guitar." I handed him his clear Dan Armstrong plexiglass guitar. I always loved that guitar. It looks cool as hell. He put it on, kicked the song up in tempo, and just put the vibe on it. Instantly, it went from being this laconic mess into a real groove, and I thought, wow, that's what he does. This song is all about the riff and the rhythm. It's in straight up 4/4 time, but they make the rhythm sound very exciting and dynamic through the use of syncopation. Remember, that's essentially the stressing of the and, or otherwise known as the upbeats. So very typically for Stones, we've got a couple of pickup notes. Then the first full measure is pretty straightforward. Measures 3 and 4 are loaded with syncopation. Listen for the notes and accents falling on the and beats. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and... And of course, we get the classic Mick lyrics. He's feeling out of sorts because love, well, it's a bitch. I'm feeling so tired. Can't understand it. Just had a fortnight's sleep. I'm feeling so stuffed. I'm so distracted. Ain't touched a thing all week. I'm feeling drunk, juiced up and sloppy. Ain't touched a drink all night. I'm feeling hungry. Can't see the reason, just had a horse meat pie. Samba Petit is a track taken from Carlos Santana's classic Abraxas album. It's an instrumental, of course, the only one to appear on this list, and by far my favorite Santana tune of all time. It's also become one of his most enduring tracks. And this is another tune that was also released as an A-side at one point, but initially it was the B-side of Oye Como Va in 1971, Santana's cover of the old Tito Puente tune. Now I like that song okay, but I don't think it can touch Samba Petit. Then in 1973, Santana re-released it as the A-side of a single. I think it's one of those cases where they just realized they got it wrong. Artists are not always the best judge of which material is going to be the most popular. The song's title translates as Samba for You. Santana tells a great story about what inspired it. Samba Petit was conceived in New York City on a Sunday afternoon. I opened the window. I saw this man in the street. He was drunk and he had a saxophone and a bottle of booze in his back pocket. And I kept looking at him because he kept struggling with himself. He couldn't make up his mind which one to put in his mouth first, the saxophone or the bottle. I immediately heard a song. When I read that, it all made sense. This music is beautiful, but there's an incredible sadness and longing there. Santana perfectly captured the sadness of this character that he saw on the street. And of course, it's always all the more amazing when an artist can do that with only music and not words. Musically, I would call this A Dorian, which has a parent key of G major. The chords are very simple. A minor, G major, B minor, E minor, and back to A minor. Now the key to Dorian mode is the raised sixth, and that's prominent here. Santana likes that mode a lot, in fact. Right, he uses that in Oye Como Va and many others. One thing I've always noticed about Santana, he doesn't use nearly as much vibrato as many rock players. I find myself wanting to add it in. I actually have to fight to control that. See, I want to go, but I actually think it's really effective the way he does it. He uses the vibrato very sparingly. There are moments in this track where it literally sounds like the guitar is crying, particularly in those moments where he'll put a little overdub. We have two guitars going, and when he does those bends, maybe they're slightly out of tune. Very effective and emotional. By the way, although this tune is obviously Santana's baby, there are other elements that contribute to its greatness. I love Greg Raleigh's Hammond organ part. When that thing comes in after the long, slow build-up, it sounds incredible. I made sure to get the entrance of that organ in there in the snippet that I played in the beginning.
You could be my silver spring, blue-green colors flashing. I would be your only dream, your shining autumn ocean crashing.
Silver Springs is a great little Stevie Nicks tune that simply had the misfortune of being submitted for inclusion on Fleetwood Mac's phenomenal Rumors album. That's the ultimate example of an album that doesn't have a weak track, so it just got lost in the shuffle. it was relegated to the B-side of Go Your Own Way, a brilliant tune in its own right, and largely forgotten about for around 20 years. Apparently, Stevie lobbied extremely hard for its inclusion on Rumors and was severely disappointed when it didn't make the cut. Richard Dashett, who was the engineer on Rumors, has called it the best song that never made it to a record album. And then in 1997, the group included it in their incredible comeback performance and album entitled The Dance, and it was given a whole new life. I admit, I had never heard the song before that time, and I remember thinking, wow, where did this thing come from? The song was even nominated for a Grammy in 1998 for Best Performance by a Pop Duo or Group. I think by this point it's pretty much common knowledge that the recording of the Rumors album was rife with turmoil and drama as the various band members were in the process of ending relationships with one another. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham were on the rocks. John and Christine McVie's marriage was ending, and many of the album's songs were about this. Silver Springs is no exception. It's basically Stevie speaking directly to Lindsey about what might have been. You could be my Silver Spring, blue-green colors flashing. Meanwhile, the A-side, Go Your Own Way, is Lindsey wailing his heart out to Stevie about their imminent breakup. There's a ton of angst on this record. I think my favorite part of the tune is that little bridge that comes in every so often. The song is in the key of C major, but they make an abrupt shift to the relative minor key of A minor. I've talked about this before on my channel, but usually in reverse. The minor verse and then the major chorus to brighten things up. But here it gets really dark in a hurry. This is an old trick that's been used so many times over the years, but for some reason it feels more impactful here. Time cast a spell on you, but you won't forget me. I know I could have loved you, but you would not let me. And then gently back to C for the verse.
Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise playing in the street. Gonna be a big man someday. You got mud on your face, you big disgrace. Kicking your can all over the place, singing, We will rock you.
We Will Rock You and its A-side, We Are the Champions, are pretty much joined at the hip by this point, much in the tradition of things like the Beatles with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and With a Little Help from My Friends, Led Zeppelin's Heartbreaker and Living Loving Maid. Both We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions were taken from Queen's News of the World album. That album opens with We Will Rock You and then segues seamlessly into We Are the Champions. Neither song is really more popular than the other, but on the single, We Will Rock You was the B-side. I've discussed this tune already on my channel when I included News of the World on my top 10 rock albums of 1977 video, but I had to include it again here. Few B-sides have been as impactful as this one. More than anything, I think it's just the anthemic quality of this track, which is why so many sports teams have used it as a kind of fight song over the years. Of course, the thing I love about this song is its uniqueness. The fact that it's mostly a cappella, just those foot stomps and hand claps up until the very end. How many rock songs are set up that way? The band actually recorded a more traditional version with full rock band, drums, and bass. Check it out if you haven't. It's cool, but it kind of just sounds like any other rock and roll tune. They made it really special by doing it this way. And then, of course, there's that incredible Brian May guitar solo at the end. It sounds like the hand of God when he crashes that C power chord. And the lead in, that sustained E note that starts to feed back, goes on and on and on for many bars beforehand, just building the anticipation. Thanks a lot, guys. Don't forget, financial donations are not expected, but very much appreciated. Buy me a coffee or PayPal. Look for the links in the description of this video. See you soon.